Hello and welcome everyone to another Substack Live on the NASCAR Substack channel. I'm Zach Sturniolo, joined as always by Cameron Richardson. We are NASCAR reporters for NASCAR.com's editorial team, and we are joined once again by special guest Neil Paine, data analytics expert. Welcome back to the party. How are you, Neil?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. It's exciting. It's championship weekend, guys.
Championship weekend. Cameron, how excited are you for everything that's about to happen this weekend?
It's been another long season, but I'm looking for. I think we're going to have three pretty competitive championship races this weekend, and so always looking forward to it. Let's get it rolling.
Absolutely. So it starts tonight with the NASCAR Custom Truck Series in their finale at 7:30 Eastern on FS1. Tomorrow night we'll have the Xfinity Series finale at 7:30 Eastern on the CW, and of course the main event on Sunday, the NASCAR Cup Series Championship race at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC, Peacock, MRN Radio, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio as well. So let's start there. We know now that the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series champion will be one of Kyle Larson, William Byron, Chase Briscoe, or Denny Hamlin. Neil, you wrote a great piece on NASCAR.com that went live yesterday, giving your reasons and odds why each of those will or will not win the championship on Sunday afternoon. What stood out to you most through your deep dives on each of those four?
Well, one of the things that stood out is just that like each of them has their own kind of like metric or argument to be made to be champion, which I think speaks to how balanced and how talented this championship four is. So for instance, it's like for Denny, obviously there's the kind of non-statistical reason of feeling like, hey, this is his year. Finally, it's his chance. It's probably his last best chance to get it done at age 44. Probably not going to get many more chances like this left. But also, he's really good at not just Phoenix, but also the kind of Phoenix adjacent tracks, so like Richmond, Gateway, Loudon, that type of track. He's the best, I think, easily in the championship four at those types of tracks. Then Larson, we talked, I think, last week about how he had this weird midseason lull in his performance. He's pulled that out of that big time and is actually been the best driver by driver rating over the course of the playoffs, the last 9 races among the championship four. Christopher Bell, a little bit better during the span of the playoffs, but we had to say goodbye to him last week. And so he has kind of shown, I think, maturity, the fact that he was able to do what he had to do last week to be able to advance. He didn't get caught up in any kind of craziness and just was like very businesslike in beating Bell in their points battle. Byron stood out to me like crazy because when I went into writing the piece, I thought, okay, I'm probably going to pick either Hamlin or Larson. It just kind of makes sense. Like that's my gut feeling going in. But the more I looked at Byron, the more I was like, whoa, that's kind of impressive. And that's kind of impressive. All these stats stood out. So he's been the best driver this year by average driver rating all season long. And some of that's been the peak performances that he's had, but he also never has a bad race. He had by far the lowest frequency of races that were below average this year. So to beat him head to head, you got to bring it. You got to be pretty sure that you're going to have to bring it at like a high level. He's also been the best next gen era driver at Phoenix specifically, which we know Phoenix is very specific kind of technical track. That track record at this particular track matters probably more than other tracks when we're looking at history. So that's a huge feather in his cap, in my opinion. And then the win that he had last week was one of the best clutch walk-off wins in the history of this format. Just dominance from wire to wire practically, where he was just on a mission and he went out and he accomplished that mission. I found that it was the second best driver rating in any walk-off win by a championship four driver to clinch a spot in the championship race. The only one that was better was Kevin Harvick at Phoenix, ironically, back when they had that as the second to last race in 2014. He had a perfect driver rating. Kevin Harvick went on to actually win the championship in Homestead the next week. So there could be a parallel there. And then finally, Briscoe. We've talked about how Briscoe has this perception of being the underdog. He's the kind of, oh, what's this guy doing here of the championship four? But again, he has dominated pretty much since the middle of the regular season and hasn't really let up in the playoffs either. He's won twice in the playoffs. And you can make the case that for like 6 sustained months, he's been the best driver in the Cup Series. So I found it really fascinating that like each of these guys has something that they can point to say like, hey, this is why I should be the champion. And you don't always have that. Sometimes there's guys in there where you're just like, hey, he's here, maybe he's got a shot at it, but ultimately we think that these other guys should be favorites. Here, you could make a compelling case for each of the four, which I think is pretty cool.
It is interesting because to me, the two guys who entered this weekend with the most momentum in the Cup Series feel like Denny Hamlin and William Byron. Hamlin obviously has the benefit of having won the first race in the round of 8 and not necessarily needing to run well at Talladega and Martinsville. Thank goodness for him, because mechanical gremlins really threw him for a loop at both of those racetracks. He was running second at Martinsville last weekend when his engine blew. Um, but then the other one is William Byron, who, despite the results at Vegas and Talladega, I felt like he was the guy to beat each of these last 3 races. Finally got it done in Martinsville without any issues, but he was leading, or he had just fallen to second at Vegas when he ran into Ty Dillon and that fiasco effectively, and then was running fifth coming out of the trial and coming to the checkered flag at Talladega. That team has really risen. I think really the last 3 weeks for the 24 team have been its best 3-week stretch of the entire season. I don't know if the stats bear that out, but certainly it feels that way from the eye test. Now, that said, Cameron, as you listen to all of this, what jumps out to you about this quartet and that makes it feel any different from past championship 4 groups?
Well, I'd say in at least the next gen era, there's always been at least one driver that's had some sort of issue or they just struggled on track. You think of Chase in 2022 when he spun off the nose of Ross Chastain. You had Bell's brake failure in 23, and then Tyler Reddick just really didn't have any pace in last year's title race. I just don't know if that is possible among this group of 4 since they all are pretty great at Phoenix. So what really it comes down to could really be momentum. And I really look at a guy like William Byron, who it took him a while for him to really have this coming out party as the driver of the 24. And, it's 24 years since the 24 last won a championship, Gordon in 2001. So maybe just all the stars are aligning for this to be William Byron's official, I'm here, I'm the driver of this 24, because I think a lot of people still look at Byron in the shadows of Jeff Gordon. Can he ever fill in and be the 24 driver? And I think, and especially, and Byron's never been this like aggressive racer, and to see him move Blaney the way he did at Martinsville, I think it shows like, hey, this is the guy now that's not afraid to show, who he is behind the wheel. Because obviously he's been a little bit kind of closed off throughout his Cup career. We didn't really know who William Byron was. And now, as he sort of opened up more, speaking to media, and now we see it in his, in his racecraft, I think he sort of really formed he's starting to carve his own path. And with his numbers at Phoenix, it just really shows that I think this is the guy that should be the favorite coming in, but it's all so, so close right now. I mean, you go back to the photo finish in the spring. Hamlin and Larson were a part of that. Granted, Christopher Bell won that race, but they were right there. And so I just don't know if anyone, I think it's going to be more like the 2020 and 2021 races where all 4 championship 4 guys are going to be running in the top 4 at the very end.
I tend to agree, and I think we forget that William Byron, this is already his 3rd consecutive trip to the championship 4, and just reading his body language, both after winning at Martinsville last week, and going through championship 4 media day on Thursday here in Phoenix, he just feels so relaxed. He seems very at peace with where he is in his career, very confident, but not in a sense that is ready to lay off the pedal, if that makes any sense. It seems to me that he is the most comfortable with his role in the sport, with his role in the 24 car, and his role at Hendrick Motorsports. It really almost reminds me of what he was at JRM in the Xfinity Series when he won the championship there, and what he was at KBM in his rookie year, winning all of those races. It is really impressive to see what he has matured into as a driver, and I feel like this could be a coming out party for him on Sunday if he's able to cap that off. Um, is there
Yeah,
anything
that belief,
else? Yeah.
you could kind of tell he almost had this kind of quiet belief, even in the post race interview after Martinsville, of like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. I think he said like these things have a way of working out. Like it was just sort of, he knew all along he was going to be here. And to your point, he's been a staple here. I think sometimes it's maybe hard to remember that, but like him getting to the championship four now, it's kind of an every year thing. It would have been weird for him not to make it.
Well, and he said that yesterday at media day that effectively this is like business as usual at this point for the 24 team. It feels normal because for the last now 3 seasons, he's gotten on a plane, he's flown to Phoenix on Wednesday instead of on, later in the week when everyone else is showing up, and he's part of these media day festivities, and I think there's a lot of relief that comes along with that, right? Because you know the process, right? And there's no, "Well, it's different this year," and like, now this is all switched around. He's got this down to a routine at this point. So I do think that is an edge, especially over a guy like Chase Briscoe, who this is his first championship four appearance, or Denny Hamlin, who, despite the fact that he's been in multiple championship four opportunities, it's been 3 years since he's been back in this position.
Yeah, totally.
That's
And Denny is an interesting one because again, there's that like sense of urgency, I think, compared with some of these other guys. Like you've got Briscoe, who I think nobody thought would be here, so it's kind of an opportunity. And then you've got Larson and Byron. It's like they're expected to be here. They have the weight of that, but also they're in the middle of their prime. They got plenty more years to do this. And then you have Denny, who is like, is this the last time he's going to be here? We don't know.
Let's jump into the Xfinity series a little bit now, and preview into Saturday. The championship four there includes 10 race winner Connor Zilich, defending champion Justin Allgaier, Richard Childress Racing's Jesse Love, and JRM's number one driver Carson Kvapil. Neil, there are 3 other drivers here, but there is one really worth talking about here with Connor Zilich, and what he has done. What it feels like this is the most dominant season we've ever seen in the Xfinity series. Do the stats bear that out?
Yeah, so you got to toss out some of the bushwhackers with apologies to Kyle Busch and some of the other guys. There were more dominant seasons, just if you include the guys that like Kyle Busch had one year where he won 10 times in 17 races in the Busch series or Xfinity, whatever you want to call it. But among full-time Xfinity drivers, this is the most dominant season. So I have a stat called Adjusted Points Index, which looks at the quality of your finishes with bonuses to higher finishes and wins relative to the average for the series. So Connor Zilich this year was 179% better than the average drive per race. That's the only time since a guy named Sam Ard in 1984 that somebody was at least 170% better than average. And that was a very different Xfinity. Well, it wasn't even the Xfinity series. It was the late model series. It was still in its infancy, just its third year. So when you look at what Zilich has done in the modern incarnation, there really isn't a parallel. And just to kind of bring it back to Kyle Busch as well, Sam Ard, Kyle Busch, Connor Zilich, only guys to have double-digit win seasons in the history of this series. So it really has been a special season. And then you bake in the fact that he's, I think, the second youngest regular driver in the series. So this guy has shown more potential. I have a chart in the story that I did about him being possibly, probably the best prospect in the history of NASCAR, full stop, where I plotted out Xfinity performance against age. And it really kind of crystallizes the fact that you have a few data points that are kind of in the neighborhood. You've got a few Ty Gibbs seasons from a few years ago, Joey Logano in 2008, Chase Elliott 2014. Eric Jones had a great season in 2015 in Xfinity, but none are really that close to what Connor Zilich has done. And then you got to go all the way over to much older, more veteran drivers. Sam Ard is a great example of that, to find cases of people that were in the same neighborhood in terms of like dominance or performance. So if we're talking about combinations of being this good in this series at such a young age, you can't really find parallels. I was expecting like Jeff Gordon to show up really well. He had a season that was kind of in that same mold of like the Joey or the Chase Elliott type of season, but he was like 5 or 6 years older than Connor Zilich. And we think of Jeff Gordon as being like the young gun of NASCAR when he was coming up in the 90s. But Connor Zilich has outdone him and pretty much everybody else at a comparable age. Now he has to do it in Cup. I think that's the big thing because within a year or two of Jeff Gordon making Cup full time, he was the youngest champion on record and was having some of the most dominant seasons ever to this day that we still haven't really seen surpassed. So there's a lot of expectations for Connor Zilic. And with some of the names that were in the neighborhood, Ty Gibbs is maybe a good example. He still hasn't won a race in Cup yet, and he really hasn't found his footing. He won the in-season tournament or whatever it was called, which is good for him. But at the same time, he has not been consistent and certainly hasn't been dominant in Cup. And there's some other interesting names that were in that neighborhood of the young drivers, like we think of like Trevor Bayne. Trevor Bayne won the Daytona 500, but kind of wasn't heard from all that much ever since. Reed Sorensen in that group. Brian Vickers, kind of an interesting name for a bunch of different reasons, but his career was cut short and didn't really achieve his potential. So a lot of the guys that were in that grouping that were really great in Xfinity at kind of a young age, it's not a guarantee. So there's still a lot of pressure on Connor Zilic, but we're kind of anointing him because what you can only go off of what somebody's done so far in their career, and what he's done has been pretty historic and remarkable.
Cameron, I do have a question for you about this weekend with Phoenix, but Neil, I want to go back to you on one more thing with Connor. To that point of success at the Cup level that we are really at this point expecting for Connor Zilic when he gets into the '87 Chevrolet for Trackhouse in 2026. I feel like in this era, now that we have the next gen car, and this will be the conclusion of our fourth season with it. It doesn't feel like we've had someone come up from the Xfinity series, get into the next gen car, and really have the same sort of success that they had at the Xfinity level. What do you feel like Zilic has what it takes to overcome whatever that difference may be?
He could. So yeah, definitely they are different cars. I think the differential between the Cup and Xfinity car has never been more different than they are in this generation and era. And that probably speaks to it. And maybe Gibbs is like the perfect example of like, you got to relearn kind of everything, go into Cup. Now Connor does have some experience under his belt. He was in a handful of races this season, but it's going to be a learning curve. I think the thing that he has going for him, though, is he is so good on road courses, and he's kind of the only guy that can go toe to toe with SVG and actually hold his own. So he may already immediately be the second best road course driver in Cup next season as a rookie. And I don't even think that's like super controversial to say. So he could pick up, a win or two if he can just kind of hang with SVG. And we've seen this in Xfinity. He's not afraid to go door to door with that guy and kind of push him out of the way. And they were teammates. So it's a thing where I think at the very least you'll see him show up there. And the thing that was really impressive is we talked about the double digit wins. Those wins came in a wide variety of different track types, which I think was really speaks to his potential. Like he won on road courses. Of course, that was the majority of his wins, but he also picked up 4 on ovals and even won a super speedway, technically. And so I think that there's the potential for him goes beyond just the dominance kind of top line numbers, but it's about like how he did it and the particulars of what's going to translate the most into the next level. And I think road courses are at the top of that list.
Before we get to Zilic in the Cup Series, he has a championship to go chase tomorrow afternoon here in Phoenix. Cameron, why is Justin Allgaier the biggest obstacle that Zilic may have to face to get that championship done on Saturday afternoon?
Well, well, for some reason, always in the Xfinity title race, it's just a very ebb and flow. And if you're willing to roll with the punches, you're going to put yourself in a position to win at the end. But look at just Allgaier's numbers in the fall Phoenix race alone. 2019, he won that race. 2020, he finished fifth. 2021, ninth. And then he's finished fifth or better in the last 4 championship races. So not only do you have to beat Allgaier, but you're pretty much going to have to be perfect. Because this is the guy that I think we saw Allgaier last year. I believe he was 2 laps down before he set himself up to win the championship. So even with all the adversity Allgaier's face, he's still probably going to be in the mix when it's time to when we get close to the end. So and it's really hard for me to like see. All right, well, where's Allgaier gonna fall here, because we've seen him fall and he gets right back up and he's right behind you for the lead in the last 20 laps. So I think really this is going to be a race of, Zilic really has to start out front. He's got to maintain track position and keep Allgaier behind him for as long as possible. Because if you do that, then you can kind of lean Allgaier into making mistakes late. And we almost saw, if we remember, I think it was the first or second overtime restart last year, Allgaier nearly spun into the wall after contact with, I believe I think it was Jesse Love, but it was a pretty jarring moment that almost ended Allgaier's chances of winning a championship again. And this is a guy that's overcome all the heartbreak. He's seen it all in this championship four. And I think that's really where he has the advantages. Zilic hasn't had that heartbreaking moment and hasn't had to overcome adversity. Allgaier has seen it 2 times more than anything else. He's done it. He's done it all. He's seen it all. It's just nothing is going to stop Allgaier from winning the chase title number 2. And I don't think there's anything that is stopping him unless Zilic does have a perfect race. And I feel sorry for Jesse Love and Carson Kvapil because it's like, all right, well, how do they stop those 2 guys?
Well, and it sounds like Allgaier is relishing sort of all this Zilic talk that we are contributing to right now, where it's like, hey, look, I'm the most experienced guy at Phoenix by far among the championship four. I've won here before. I'm the defending champion. Like, maybe I should, people be talking about me. So I do think there's that element of a chip on the shoulder around like the coronation of Zilic, who by all rights, I mean, he is the deserving champion of the year. He's been the best driver in Xfinity all year long, but we know that that doesn't matter. Everything kind of gets wiped clean at going into this race, and so that's why Phoenix is so compelling as a championship site for all these different series. Is that it's a very specific track where what you did at the rest of the season doesn't really matter. It's what you can do here.
Quickly before we get over to the truck series, are we? How badly are we overlooking Carson Kvapil and Jesse Love and what they're capable of doing tomorrow night?
I mean, I don't think that you can rule them out. It is kind of sad or disrespectful that that we are kind of talking about that, because like Jesse Love for the whole season, his numbers are he had fewer wins, but his numbers are like pretty comparable, I think, to Allgaier. Like overall, obviously neither is close to Zilic, but you can't overlook anybody who's reached this phase of the season for sure.
So it's a very similar story in the truck series this evening. We have an 11 race winner in the form of Corey Heim, who is joined by another defending champion, Ty Majeski, Rockingham winner Tyler Ankrum, and Homer Friesen Racing's Caden Honeycutt. It really does almost feel like a rinse and repeat here. But Cameron, why is this year the year that Corey Heim finally wins the Truck Series championship after a couple of years of heartbreak?
To me, I think there's a different level of confidence, especially when you face some of the adversity and rivalries that you had throughout the last 2 years. Because arguably, if things go a certain way, he could be eyeing a third straight truck title. Obviously, 2023 was its own beast in itself, but I just think this is a guy that's never been more confident ever in his career. And, I do like, I read your story on Ty Majeski, Zach, about Corey Heim. I do love the trash talk coming from Majeski. And, he has every right to. He dominated last year's truck title race. So I think if you can try to that's the one way to do it, is if you want to get in Heim's head, that's the way, is to be like, well, I've got him right where we want him. So it's just about maintaining a level head. I don't think Heim's really done that in the championships. I think last year he was probably watching a 98 truck run away and be like, all right, again, here we are. Here we go again. So it could be one of those where it's like, all right, well, I think because I don't even think Majeski made a 10 lap, consecutive run in practice. He put down the fastest lap and was like, all right, don't need the short cards any further here. Let's call it a day. And Heim stayed out on track longer to make sure, okay, I need to find a way to get to the top of the board at some point. So I'd say until qualify, I mean, Majeski had the advantage right now, but I think just confidence and a level head is going to be what Heim needs to win the championship tonight. If he does that, it's going to be a perfect evening. If he doesn't, then that 98, like you said, it's got him right where he wants Corey Heim.
So to your point, I did write on Thursday a piece for NASCAR.com on Ty Majeski's comments on coming into this weekend and setting his sights on Corey Heim. What he said in his media day availabilities was effectively that he had heard what Corey had to say about what a shame it would be if the 98 took, or anyone took, the championship from Corey after the year that they've had. And effectively, expressed his discontent with the prospects of losing the championship this evening. Majeski responded by saying, I think we've got him right where we want him. I think he's worried about the 98. I don't think he wanted to race us this weekend. And here we are with another shot at it. And to your point, he did dominate this race a year ago, led 132 of 150 laps from the pole position to win the race and win the championship. It certainly feels like he is the biggest threat, especially after what we've seen ThorSport do in this race at this track for the last few years. Neil, is there anyone who can stop Corey Heim this evening?
Well, yeah, Ty Majeski. I mean, that's I think one of the interesting things you kind of alluded to it earlier is the fact that in both Xfinity and trucks, we have a situation where there is a very strong and very proven, I don't know if you would even call it underdog, but sort of challenger that we could end up seeing two guys with 21 combined wins this season and neither of them win the championship. Make of that what you will, because, you know, under the old point system and all that stuff, there would be kind of nothing that you could do to avert the guys that have 21 total wins between them from winning two championships. But under the system that we have now, there's that excitement factor and uncertainty factor that, again, it doesn't matter what you did throughout the season, how many races you win. It's really about this one race this weekend, and that's true across all three major series.
This also marks Phoenix's last year as host of the NASCAR Championship weekend. For now, we know that Phoenix will be part of a rotation model for the championship race over the next couple of years, along with Homestead Miami Speedway, which is where the championship race will return in 2026. Cameron, how much have you enjoyed what Phoenix has brought as the championship race since we started coming here for the championship in 2020?
I'm more biased as a guy from the West Coast. I got to cover championship weekend in 2020 and 2021. It's just a good environment. You know, you look out, if you ever walk to the top of the grandstand of Phoenix and you look out to the desert and you see all the RVs parked, it's just a great setting. And, you know, it's a beautiful sunset. It's a perfect way to sunset the season, honestly. But I mean, you can't really beat Homestead. And look, it'll be exciting to see that finale go back. But Phoenix, just a different beast. There's no track really like it. You know, you can try to compare all the 1 mile short ovals that we have in the sport, and it's really just its own little character. I think having a character as long as you did as a championship four race, even though we raced there in the spring, I think it's still, you're never going to have the same exact Phoenix race twice in the same year. And I think the championship race has really, over the last half decade, has really been like, all right, you have to be perfect in this race. And I think that's a defining statement for a champion is if you win at Phoenix, you had a perfect weekend. Now, Allgaier may be a different character, given that I don't think he's ever had a perfect weekend at Phoenix. But just over time, I just think the whoever has gone on to win the title at Phoenix had the best weekend and had it perfect on race day.
Yeah, and I think there's pros and cons to both. I know that it's popular that Homestead is returning, and I'm going to be excited to see that again. I have like a lot of great fond memories from seeing that be the championship race, Martin Truex, all that. And so I do think, though, when I was looking at, so I did some stuff around, some of it was around Daytona and Talladega, like the unpredictable tracks, but finding that Phoenix was like one of the more predictable tracks in terms of like the high skill drivers were the ones that really did well there. This is across both the spring and the fall. And Homestead a little bit less, but to me, Homestead, if Phoenix is more of a driver skill type of track and technical in that regard, Homestead is like a team, tire management and just having the whole team have a great weekend type of track. And so there's kind of pros and cons. I like that they're talking about rotating them, which is kind of similar to like college football, where you have the championship on different sites at different years and things like that. I think that's really good because Phoenix has given us some really great memories also of the championships. And I know there were people that were like, although we don't have to worry about that this year, but like, oh, Penske, it's like a home court advantage for them when they get there. So if you let Logano get there, if you let Blaney get there, then they're just going to run away with it. Fortunately, we don't have that in play this season, this championship four. So, and that's why it's good to rotate, because you can't have like, if you're just a specialist, if you're a Phoenix merchant, you can know that you can look to that at the end of the season. But it's also I think it brings a lot of character, and like Cameron was talking about, it's got these beautiful vistas, it's got the cool dog leg, it just has like so many different elements from other tracks where Homestead is maybe a little bit more similar to other tracks that are on the schedule, but in a really good way, because I think it's arguably the best, certainly oval in the schedule. So there's good to be had across a bunch of different sites.
And I think what's interesting about Homestead is it really is the only asphalt 1.5 mile true oval on the schedule. Like we have a concrete oval in Bristol and Dover, but Homestead does bring out it does ask teams to bring their best for an intermediate style race. And so it'll be exciting to go back there in 2026. But I agree. Having covered each of the last four, now five championship weekends here in Phoenix, this has been just a wonderful host city. You fly in and you see billboards literally plastered all over the sides of skyscrapers. It's pretty special. The city really does go all out to embrace what NASCAR brings to the city, and what the city brings to NASCAR. And it's really made this weekend feel special every time we've been here. That said, we've got some champions to crown this weekend. Neil, what have you got going on? What do you want to plug? Please, but direct people where they can find you.
Well, they can check out, the stories that I wrote about the pros and cons of each Championship 4 driver in Cup, NASCAR.com, and also my case that Zilich is the best prospect in NASCAR history. I'm sure that one will be controversial or interesting to people. And then otherwise, they can find me at neilpaine.substack.com. That's NEILPAINE, where I write about all the other different sports. We've got, there's going to be a baseball champion crowned this weekend, one way or the other as well. And it could be a little bit also similar of like the juggernaut Dodgers potentially falling to the upstart Toronto Blue Jays. So we could have that story play out in multiple NASCAR series and then also in Major League Baseball. But I also launched an NBA model for people that want to kind of check out and follow the chances of every team winning the NBA championship as well. So there's a lot going on there. Encourage everybody to check it out.
Now to our resident Dodgers fan, Cameron Richardson.
I have the weekly Racing Insights, the final Racing Insights prediction of the year that doesn't actually have a Championship 4 driver winning on Sunday. And also, I got to make a little fun gallery of the biggest Championship 4 heartbreaks across all three series. So from Carl Edwards in 2016, the Grant Enfinger in 2023, I've got every single one covered, I think, on there. So be sure to check that out on NASCAR.com. And then if you want to find me on social, my Twitter is at The Rich Report.
As we mentioned earlier, I wrote about Ty Majeski and his sights on going back to back as a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series champion. That's on NASCAR.com. And then either later today or tomorrow, there will be another piece on Kyle Larson, who says he is as calm as he has ever felt for Championship 4 week. But he also explained why it bugs him so much that people don't think he loves or is committed to NASCAR the way that he really is. Talked about the goals that he has out for himself, the longevity that he sees for his runway in the NASCAR Cup Series. Just a lot of really interesting insight that we don't always get from Kyle, that he was very candid about on Thursday in Media Day. So that'll be on NASCAR.com this weekend as well. I will have coverage post-race from the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and Cup Series this weekend. All found on NASCAR.com and on X at Zaxter, ZACHSTUR. It's going to be fun. We crown the Truck Series champion tonight at 7:30 Eastern on FS1. An Xfinity Series champion Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern on the CW. And on Sunday, the main event, NASCAR Cup Series Championship race at 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC, Peacock, MRN Radio, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.